Queen's College.
Welcome, ma'am.
Good evening, friends. This is Renu Mule, and I'm heading the Vedansh International School, Indore.
Namaste everyone. I'm Mrs. Lalita Singh. I'm principal of the Shishukund International School.
Namaste everyone. I'm Kamaini Chauhan from the Shishukunj International School and I am in charge of Junior Wing. Thank you.
Welcome, ma'am.
Namaste everyone. I'm Sandhya Bhargav from Shishukunj International School, looking after the academics, Vice Principal.
Most welcome, ma'am.
Namaste to all. I am Dhirendra Dave from Shishukunj International School.
Welcome, sir.
Good evening, everybody. Girijavi Menon, myself, principal of Marthama Academy, scheme number 114, Indore.
Welcome, ma'am.
Good evening, one and all, and this is Poonam Shekhawat, principal of Vedanta, the Global School. Thank you so much.
Welcome, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm Mrs. Nalini Pal from Columbia Convent.
Welcome, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm Ms. Khatwani from National Public School as a director.
Welcome, ma'am.
Good evening, all. I'm Nandini Banerjee from Iron International School.
Welcome, ma'am.
Good evening everyone. I'm Abhilasha Supekar, principal around International School.
Welcome, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. This is Timsi Rai from Advanced Academy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sneha Madnani from Creative Minds Global School, Neemaj.
Welcome, ma'am.
Very good evening to all. I'm Reena Khurana from Golden International School.
Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I am Ishit Malvi from Brilliant Higher Secondary School.
Welcome, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I am Rupali Jain from Medicaps International School, looking after examination department.
Welcome, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mrs. Richa Navle, principal of DC Memorial Higher Secondary School. Very warm good evening to Nalini Palma. She is the principal of my school where I did my study. Hello, ma'am.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Welcome to the conclave, ma'am. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. I am from Gujarati schools, Sejal Patel.
Welcome, ma'am.
Good evening to all. I am Anita Sharma from Gujarati School.
Welcome, ma'am. Ajay Avinan, one more introduction.
Good evening, sir. I am from Anita Chauhan, Maharishi Vidya Mandir.
Welcome, ma'am. All right, so a warm welcome to all of you at this conclave today. It's 2023's first very education conclave which is happening from our side and which is in our own way city, Indore. The moment has come to introduce a person whom we are waiting for. I'll just give you his quick glimpses. He's an educational entrepreneur who has helped change the way student learning outcomes are seen in India. He has worked in IBM India for 2.5 years before co-founding and running Eklavya School in Ahmedabad. He is a member of various central and state government committees related to education, including the Committee for Devising Model Rules for the Right to Education Act in Gujarat. He is a member of NCRT's National Expert Group on Assessment in Elementary Educations, NEJAEE, and a trustee of Pratham, Gujarat, as well as other educational institutes. He's got his bachelor's degree in engineering from IIT Madras before going on to complete his PhDM from IIM Ahmedabad. So without wasting much time, with a very huge round of applause, let's welcome Sridhar Rajagopalan sir on stage, please. Pleasure, sir.
mic to come on, yeah. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining us today, I think on a very important topic. And I'll just quickly run through what we are planning to do. So I will take about the next hour or so and run you through the main topic for today, which is the NEP, what the NEP says, what are the implications of this for schools, what schools can do, how we are working with the boards as well as supporting schools on this. And I will stop from time to time. Feel free to ask me questions while I'm during the conversation. Otherwise, I will anyway pause from time to time when we can take questions. Subsequently, my colleague, Ms. Jayanti Dasgupta, who has headed our academic consulting and sales in the past, but is now working on making customer experiences successful. She will talk about a bit of our products, give you a bit of a feel, and do another interactive sessions, after which we can have more open discussion. So the aim is to make this as interactive as possible. We have a very good mix of all of you here, some of whom have experienced these products for many years, and some who are completely new. So we hope that there is a lot of learning and interaction from that as well. And after all this, we will have dinner and then close for the day. So if that sounds fine, I will start. I'll just find my clicker. So yeah, this is the agenda of my talk, which is talking about the NEP 2020. What are the reasons, why is the NEP saying what it is saying? What are the global factors that are kind of causing this? Our work, so we are working both with the CBSE board as well as the SCSE board. We were invited by both the boards to help make some of the changes that the NEP talks about, and I'll talk to you about that work. How schools, all schools that are participating in our conferences, we tell the boards that, these are the leading schools who are trying a number of practices themselves. And in the same way, we tell the schools that, you can go ahead of what the NEP and the boards are saying. So what are the things that schools can do? What are the learnings from, schools around the world? That is the last thing. And then my colleague Jayanti will talk about our work on assessments and learning. I'll go there. So we'll first start with the NEP. Now, many of you may be aware of the NEP and what it says. I'll give you an overview, and there are interesting points there. There are some misconceptions at times, so we can talk about those also. Very briefly, I think the reason for the NEP that was quoted, and many people felt this, was that we had the Kothari Commission in 1968, which was the first policy. Then 1986 and 1992, there was the next policy just after Rajiv Gandhi had become the Prime Minister. But after the 1986 policy, it was felt that there had been no national policy, and at least two major events. One was the liberalization, and second, of course, was the technology front, and had completely changed the landscape in society. And there was a feeling that there was need for a policy at this point of time. So with this in mind, there was a committee headed by Dr. Kasturi Rangan, who is a former ISRO chairman, a wide level of consultations across the country, and this led to the new education policy. Initially, there was a draft in 2019. The draft is very large, it's about 450-page draft, but the final policy is a 60-page, fairly concise policy that touches on various points. So this was the process, and one of the things is that a number of attempts, even now, I don't know if you've seen a document called the NEP mandate, a number of steps have been taken to list down what is in the NEP and kind of almost convert them into tasks, and making sure that many of these are done. So there's a fairly systematic process to ensure that the guidelines or the suggestions in the NEP are being implemented to the extent possible. So this is the process that has been followed. Now, at a glance, what does the NEP talk about? The boxes in gray are also very important points, but maybe less relevant to private English medium schools. So that's why we put it in gray. But just for your information, EI works extensively with government schools and governments also. So we find that those areas also are extremely important. But if I look at the colored boxes, so one of the ones in pink are the ones that talk about the early childhood education and foundation literacy and numeracy. So that will be universalized. Also the curriculum and pedagogy, the 5+3+, that system which is focusing a lot. I mean, the main difference in the system is that 3 years before class 1 is also going to be a part of the formal system. Already you know that the National Curricular Framework for Pre-Primary Education has been released. So that is also, I mean, we probably see the effect of it in the next 1 or 2 years, but that is one of the important things that the NEP talks about. The green one is the point on teachers. We'll talk briefly about it later, which is the National Professional Standards and the teacher qualifications process. Nothing has happened yet, but it's going to be changed quite a bit by 2030. And the blue one, I mean, one thing interesting about the NEP is that when the final draft came out, it came out in the middle of COVID. So 2019, when the draft was made, there was no COVID and technology was kind of talked about a bit. But by 2020, when it came out, we had seen what technology had done for education. And so one sees that the final draft of the NEP talks about technology a lot, but specifically about how can it provide equitable access to more and more students. So these are some of the aspects, and if you have questions or during the discussions, we can discuss the other points also. But the two things in yellow are probably the ones that are most relevant for schools, and even the ones that the CBSE and the other organizations have taken up most seriously in terms of implementation. And a lot of the NEP is about assessment and assessment reform. And it kind of comes up again and again as we go through the NEP. So transforming assessment to focus on core skills, setting up of PARAK, what the NEP calls the National Assessment Center, which has now been called the PARAK, and that work is also happening. A tender has been released. You might have seen that there was a press item that international agencies like ETS and AIR and ACER, one of them is going to be selected to work on PARAK with an Indian partner. So that's also something that we've been involved with closely. Board exams will be made easier, is what the NEP says. External exams at 3, 5, and 8, what CBSE calls SAFL. So it's just some of the things, and we'll look into that in more detail. But overall, if we see, including the ones in gray, it's a very comprehensive document that touches upon almost all aspects of Indian education. There are some gaps. We'll talk a bit about that also in the end, and then we can discuss some of these points also. These are two slides that was actually used by the ministry when they announced the NEP, and they said that what they are doing. Now, transforming the culture of assessments, reforming board exams, preparing teachers for a transformed assessment system. What is interesting is that the NEP talks quite a bit about changing assessment, focusing on critical thinking skills, focusing on core competencies, but the ministry's interpretation focuses even more on these aspects. So if you see how much NEP is talking about assessment, it is quite high, but the ministry in their action plans and slides have talked a lot more about these aspects. Board exam, I'm just reading out what is highlighted. It may not be very clear from there. Board exams to be made more flexible with assessment of essential skills. Assessments to focus on core concepts, higher order and foundational skills. That's one theme that comes up again and again. Board exams will be made easier and the focus will be primarily on core capacities and learning skills. And so on. Teachers to be prepared for the reformed education system. Beginning with mathematics, all subjects will be available at 2 levels. So these are the kinds of things that the NEP talks about. A lot of focus on how the assessments will change and how children should be understanding core ideas. And they talk about rote learning, and they say that we need to move away from rote learning and so on. So in that sense, a very open document. We talked about the PARAK. Sorry, I missed this slide, so I'll just come here. This kind of just summarizes the different things that it talks about. So firstly, assess skills, not facts alone. Assessments will shift from one which is summative and testing rote memorization to formative, competency-based and testing analysis, critical thinking and conceptual clarity. All these words are exactly from the NEP. Okay, that is one theme. Redesign board exams, and it says board exams for grade 10 and 12th will be continued. So it actually clearly says that. I mean, I think there have been some discussions that maybe the board exams will go away, especially in class 10. But it does not. It says clearly that they will be continued, but reformed to eliminate the need for undertaking coaching classes. So coaching is something that, repeatedly they have said we want to reduce coaching, reduce tuitions in different ways. Board exams will primarily test core capacities, competencies rather than topics learnt by coaching and memorization. If you read it, you will find that these themes kind of come up again and again and again in different ways, on this topic. Reducing the high stake of board exams. They have said that because there is one exam, in March, April, and if you do badly in that exam, then, you may have to either take the exam again or your career can be ruined. So they are saying that, no, we want to offer it at least twice. Nothing concrete has happened on this. So, it may happen in the coming years. There was talk last year of actually offering board exams on demand, but nothing concrete has happened on this particular point. But the NEP says that reduce the high stakes. That means don't have just one exam which is, the be all and the end all kind of a thing. The NEP says that all children should have an external exam in classes 3, 5 and 8. Now, this is very difficult to do in a country like India. In fact, I don't know how we can ever think of all children in class 3, 5 and 8 having an external exam. But anyway, the CBSE has come up with the idea of SAFL. Of course, they were saying it's going to be an opt-in exam. That means schools have to choose to do it. It's not a compulsory exam. So all these are fluid. If you look at the NEP, it sounds as if it has to be a compulsory exam. Everybody has to do an exam at 3, 5 and 8. But the logistics of doing an exam for a country like India at 3, 5 and 8 is very, very complicated. The cost, everything is very high. So, but this is what it says. It says all students will take school examinations in grades 3, 5 and 8. Now, if this is done in the school, that is fine. That is not a problem. But if it is done externally by CBSE or somebody, that's very complicated to do, but maybe there will be a way. So, and even SAFL, as you all know, is being planned as a computer-based test, not a paper-based test. Right? And then there is a lot of talk of a redesigned progress card to track holistic learning, and Parak will help in this, and so on. So these are some of the themes around the assessment reform that they are talking about. And the National Assessment Center, which is now called Parak. So interesting points. One of the things they say is that the different boards, India has more than 35 boards. So one of the roles of Parak is to kind of bring about some kind of standardization or equivalence. If I score 85% in Uttar Pradesh board or something in Nagaland board or something in CBSE, how can I be sure that these students are comparable? Other countries have also done this, which is even the content of class 10 and 12. It cannot be that somebody is saying, okay, I will do calculus, somebody will say, no, I will not do it at all. So there can be a little bit of variation, but there should not be too much variation around the content, and there has to be some kind of standardization around the processes, the scoring, and so on. So that's one of the roles of Parak. There is, the SAS and the NAS, the National Achievement Survey and the State Achievement Surveys, is something that the NCRT does right now, but this is planned to be moved to Parak. Monitoring achievement of learning outcomes and helping school boards to shift their assessment patterns to focus on 21st century skills. So Parak is seen as a technical agency with expertise in assessments. And we have to see how it happens, but they have taken a number of steps. So there was a tender, agencies have submitted their thing, and NCRT is doing it. In fact, they should have selected the agency by now, but it's probably going to happen in the next few weeks or so on. So that is the plan around Parak. Teachers, the main thing is that they want a 4-year training program to be the main development program for teachers. This is a bit like the system in America and many other countries, which is after class 12, you do your 4-year course that will cover both. Suppose you want to do a BSc chemistry, so it will cover chemistry but also give you teaching skills in that. So like the the RIEs have had a BSc Ed or a BA Ed kind of a thing. So that should be the primary way of training teachers. A 2-year course can be taken by people who are joining after graduation. So if you have already got a BSc and now you want to become a teacher, then you have to do a 2-year course. So totally it took you 5 years, whereas if you had done it after 12th, it would have taken you only 4 years. And the 1-year course is only if you have already got a master's degree. So this is the intention. No concrete points yet, but this is the intention. And they said national professional standards will be released by 2022, which has not happened, but it may happen in this year, in 2023. So this is one slide. After this, I will pause for 5 minutes. If there are questions, we can discuss NEP before we go to the next topic. So there are many things that the NEP does not talk about, and it's sometimes useful to think of those also. One of the things that even we, and I'm sure all of you are kind of concerned about, is that if you read the NEP, you will get an impression that there are no private schools in the country. Even though, private schools in the country I think before COVID, we can say almost 45 to 50% of students were there. Now maybe it's gone down a little bit with COVID. Still at least 40% to 45% of students study in private schools. But the NEP does not really talk about private schools or anything, what should they do, how can they do, and so on. That's one thing. Similarly, private for-profit education, not just schools, it could be schools, but it's also things like services, teacher training, curriculum, assessments, no mention at all. So again, the model is that, okay, government is running schools, maybe a few NGOs can run schools, but that is the structure of the country. Now, which is obviously not correct. In fact, it's been moving a lot in the other direction with a lot of players coming in. You have large education companies these days. Even if you say this is bad, we don't want it, what I'm saying is the NEP pretends it does not exist. So that's one thing. Another theme is that quality, the issue of quality, how will we achieve quality in what we are doing, is something which is not explicit. I mean, one can say that if you look at all these methods and you do all these things, you may achieve quality, but it would have been nice, we feel that, the importance of quality, the importance of doing these things well, and maybe some steps towards that is another example of, something which is not. So while we are talking about, we will have a National Assessment Center or Parak, what is needed for Parak to be a very effective organization, to be a leader in this, maybe or something like that, that is not really talked about, is what we felt. And so on. I'll just talk about one more. International assessments like PISA. The NEP does not say it's good, we will do it. The NEP does not say it's bad, we won't do it. It doesn't talk about it at all. Again, we feel that documents like NEP should take a stance and say, yes, India will participate. Like in some countries, they have a goal that, we want to reach in the top 20 in so and so assessment and so on. So these are some of the things that are missing from the NEP. And I will just pause here before going to the next section. In case there are any comments, questions, or suggestions at this stage, we can discuss it. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next section.
Is there any scope of online schools also in future?
Yeah, that's a good question. So again, the NEP does not talk about it. Even when it talks about technology, it doesn't specifically talk about things like that. But in a way, the positive of that is that something like this which is not talked about, like even when I talk about PISA and it doesn't talk about it, they're not saying no also. So that is the way that we have to interpret it. From an NEP perspective, yeah, it neither encourages it, nor discourages, nor talks about the presence of it. What we are seeing internationally is that there are attempts, there are places where this is happening. Even in India, it is starting off. Now, what is the effectiveness? How does it work? How do you do that effectively? Still has to be open. But yes, from an NEP point, it's kind of open on that issue. Should I move on to the next? Yeah? Okay. So now we will, in this section, we are going to look at what are the trends, not just internationally, but the forces. Why is the NEP saying what it is saying? And is there a reason, and what are the implications of this for schools? Now, what we find is that, the forces that are cause the NEP to say what it is saying are also making a lot of change to the way that we live. And I think we all know this, right? If you just look at how things were 20 years back and what is changing. Nowadays people are talking about digital payments. There was an article I was just reading where somebody said, I went in an auto and I said, I have 500 rupees cash. And the auto guy says, why can't you use Google Pay? So all this has kind of changed. And here is a passage from Yuval Noah Harari, right? His book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. I won't read the whole passage, but I'll just tell you what he says. He says that today there are lots of people in Bangalore. When he says Bangalore, we should say in India, who are working in, you can call them call centers or back offices, right? So if you have a company like IBM, even some of the top companies in the world, a lot of their back office work was, and this is written in 2018, so already between 2018 and 2023, much of this has changed. But in 2018, a lot of the back offices were operating from Bangalore, Hyderabad, many other cities in India. What that means is that if a customer calls up IBM in Chicago, he does not know, but the call is actually being answered by somebody from Bangalore who's working in the night, knows the time in Chicago, and he's saying, what is the thing you want? He says, I have this problem with my bank account. He says, do this, do this, do this, and he solves this problem. And this is not a small number of people. A large number of people are doing this. Now he says, what is going to happen is that AI, artificial intelligence, is getting more and more powerful. And what is going to happen soon is that instead of you having to call this person in Bangalore, you will have an AI in the cloud that will be able to answer the question. And in case some of us have these kind of, if you try calling some of these American companies now, it's already happened. So now instead of putting you onto a person, they'll actually say, please describe in a few words, in your own words, what you want. And if you say, I want to transfer this thing from this account, it will say, okay, I think you want to transfer money from this account, do this, and it will solve your problem then and there. Now this looks like a very small thing, but what he says is, it means that literally like lakhs of people who have been doing this as that whole job will disappear, and you won't need that. Instead of that, you will have people who are writing code who will be creating such systems. And in the end, he says that countries like India, maybe they will be the countries that do a lot of this coding, and so these jobs will get replaced by these jobs. But he says time is running out, and this can happen only if these people develop the skills. The skills you need to answer a call and know that, okay, I have to click on this, is very different from the skills you need to be able to develop an AI product that is going to work. The education system that gave these kind of skills may not be good enough to give these kind of skills. So unless countries like India, he's not talking only of India, countries like India make this change, they could be unemployment and all those kind of issues, with a few countries and a few companies, the Googles, the Amazons of the world, making a lot of money, but a lot of other people actually having lower living standards. This is what is happening in America, by the way. A lot of the political turmoil and Donald Trump is because of these kind of things. So this, and the whole point here is, it's the education alone that can build these kind of skills. So this is the example that Yuval Noah Harari says, and that's what is written at the end. Jobs that employ lakhs today are disappearing and being replaced by others that require newer 21st century skills. So the skills that we are developing and the skills that are needed are slightly different. Now the same thing which he is saying as an anecdote, right? He is an author, a researcher, and a journalist, and this is something we also observe. But the same thing is also shown by economists, and I'll explain what this graph shows. Basically what they are saying in this graph is that they are saying that from 1960, so right at the end here is 1960 going all the way till 2010, they are saying that in the different jobs that are there in the market, in the workplace, what are the kind of skills that the jobs need? And there are two types of skills, non-routine and routine, and within that you have other kinds. For example, non-routine interpersonal, non-routine analytic, cognitive manual, right? Or routine manual, non-routine manual, and routine cognitive. And we will see examples of this, right? So for example, let's start at the end, right? So what do we mean by routine cognitive skills? So routine cognitive skills are the jobs where you are doing something that involves thinking, but it's a very routine task. For example, a secretary, in an office if there is a secretary. I mean, I don't know if offices still have secretaries, it's mostly disappeared. But that's an example of a routine cognitive skill. A bank teller, I mean, I think most of us remember, right? In the past, there weren't ATMs. You would go and you would fill up a form and somebody would give you cash. Completely routine job, but somebody has to do it. Now, these are the kinds of jobs that required much less training and education, and again would provide employment to a lot of people. And as we know today, you don't have any human tellers, you only have automated tellers. And that's what this graph shows, that the routine cognitive part of jobs has kind of completely gone away. Routine manual, non-routine manual. So routine manual is factory worker kind of example. Non-routine manual is like drivers. One of the biggest worries they have in the US is that in the US economy, almost 30 to 40% of jobs are drivers because they have so much of trucking and so on, which is all being done by people today. And they say sometime in the next 5 years, a lot of these are just going to get automated and all these jobs will go away. So these are completely disappearing. What is increasing is also very interesting. So non-routine analytic, this is programmers, financial analysts, we talked about the AI example. This has really gone up. And even more than that, non-routine interpersonal. That means a teacher, I think, is one of the best examples of non-routine interpersonal because every day is different and you're dealing with people. It's one of the richest. It's probably what they say is most difficult for AI to replace. Even a manager, a doctor, right? A doctor who has to deal with both patients and nurses, so to say, or a nurse herself, healthcare support, all of these are non-routine interpersonal roles. Now, the problem I think we recognize is if you think of our education system, the traditional system, it focuses largely on developing routine cognitive skills. It does not develop routine manual skills. It does not develop non-routine manual skills. And though we realize the importance, it's not really doing non-routine interpersonal or non-routine. In fact, non-routine is not doing at all, right? If you do anything non-routine, you know what happens. Like parents will come after the exam and say this is out of syllabus. So we are used to, we expect that, no, what we have done, only that should be asked. Whereas non-routine is exactly the opposite. It means prepare the child, or the child should be ready to take something which they have not done before. So this is the same thing that Yuval Noah Harari says, but with actual data saying that this is how the world is changing and systems are changing. So the world is changing. Now, if this is true, are other countries making these changes? And the answer is yes. If we really look in the last 20 years and you talk of educational reform, we'll talk a little later about Middle East, UAE, Dubai and others, partly because we are also working there personally. Many schools there follow the same CBSE kind of system. And in 2012, they kind of said, we want to change our system and we have these goals, and we'll talk about that. But literally, many countries around the world, even countries like Singapore, which are considered to be doing well, they've all been saying that we have to change for this kind of a world. Now, one of the advantages India has is a demographic advantage compared to all these countries, which means that we have younger people, and if we can train them, it's actually a big advantage. But these kind of education reforms are happening around the world. And once a country, like how are they checking, like if in case I make an educational reform, how do I know whether my reform has worked or not? Any thoughts, any guesses? I'm just going to keep my phone so I have track of the time. So how does a country know whether the changes they are trying to make are working or not? They do it using, tests like, there are international assessments like PISA. So PISA is something that India was also going to do. We did it in 2010, we didn't do well at all. But we were going to do it in 2022, which they cancelled. We may do it in 2025. But what is PISA? There is a rank, but that's not the most important thing. In fact, some people say that when we were doing this workshop with CBSE, sometimes people say India's challenge is that we are a large country. But one of the countries that's really topping in PISA these days is China, which is even larger. Then sometimes we say that, okay, we are not a very rich country, but Vietnam comes very high in this list. They score 14th or 17th or something in PISA. and they are like one of the poorest countries in the world. They are, the per capita income is slightly higher than India's, but it's still among the lowest in the world. So, and what you find is that PISA also focuses on how am I going to ensure that children have the skills needed for the coming future. So that's what it says here, that the way that the kind of skills that are going to be needed in the next 10 years are going to be very different from what we have been used to, and a test like PISA really measures that and gives you feedback based on that. So what does this mean in practice? In practice, it means that traditional assessments, you will recognize this because this is the kind of assessments we still use in our country. But if you go to other countries and you look at their papers, this has been changing a lot. So in every topic, what is showing here is examples from maths, English, science, and so on. For every topic, you have a way in which we say, okay, if this is the topic, the assessment is going to be like this. There is a fairly standard thing. But this is an example of a question in PISA, right? And I'll just show you what it is because it's so different from what we are used to that it's useful to see. So this is a question in PISA science, and this is asked all over the country, all over the world, to children in class 10. Basically, they say 15-year-olds, which is class 10. So what is the question? The question in the title, there's a passage first of all. The passage in the title is slope face investigation. And it says that there are some students and they are in this place which has two slopes like this. And they find that one of the slopes has a lot of trees and the other slope has very few trees. And then these students give different reasons as to why this may be the case. And the question is, who is correct and why? Of course, there are 2-3 questions, but they are basically asking you to answer that. Now, just imagine that if we were taking PISA, our class 10 children would get this question. The children who are getting this question are studying the same topics in science that our children are studying. There's no difference. They don't have any special topic on slopes or soil or anything, only what we have. So what is expected in this question is that, yes, some information is given to you and you have to reason out from this using the same principles that you have learnt in your science and answer this. And in fact, if we actually try to do this, we have done this, we have questions like this even in asset and so on. When children actually try to do this, it's not so difficult. But if you try this in your class, if you take this to your class 10 children, you will find they will say, ma'am, we can't do this. I think even as teachers, we sometimes feel, oh, what is this? How can anyone answer this? And that is the point with these kinds of assessments. And I mean, we've just gone through COVID, right? So what happened in COVID and what is still happening is that if I am a government officer, now I have to suddenly do something which is like completely different from what I have done before. I have no idea. Someone says fourth wave is going to come, someone says it's not going to come. I don't know for sure, but I have to prepare for it. And it's not just in COVID, it's happening in technology, it's happening, so you have AI, you have the chat GPT. And now people are wondering, okay, what's going to happen? How is it going to change this thing? The world has become extremely unpredictable, and the question is, how can we tackle, how can we respond to this kind of a world? So that is why we are training children to respond to something by thinking and responding, thinking and answering that question. And others are probably in the same boat, but the question is, how can you think through and respond to questions like this? So that is the difference, just going back to the previous slide. Imagine the difference between assessments that look 90% like this, and even if not 90%, let's say assessments that look 60% like this, and 40% can be traditional. This is the kind of change the NEP is talking about. The NEP is saying that, if we have to do well, then we have to have understanding based, application based, and all of these things. I will now talk a bit about the UAE system. Again, if there are questions, please raise your hand. Otherwise, it will be a one-way talk and you can agree, disagree, or ask questions. But I'll quickly explain what the UAE is doing. And I'm talking about the UAE for 2 reasons or 3 reasons. One reason is we work very closely with them. So that's one of the reasons. So we know it very well. The second reason is the schools in the UAE, we are talking about the Indian schools there. That means it's the same CBSE board and it's the same principles. So we knew this person in DPS Ghaziabad or in Sanskriti School Delhi, and that person is now the principal of GEMS in Dubai. So these people know the Indian system really well and are able to compare. So what does this system do? Sorry. Yeah. So again, this is a bit like in India, where there is this was around 2011 or 12, where they said that education is going to be a major focus for us. That we believe that, so we all think the UAE depends on oil, which is very true, but Dubai particularly, they are saying that we don't want to be dependent only on oil, and they are saying that our wealth is really the education of our people. So this was a kind of a strong message that came from the top. Now based on this message, they came up with this agenda. This is all around 2012, not very long back. They said world-class education is our goal. And not only that, if you read it carefully, they say we want to be among the top 20 in PISA. When they wrote this, they were 53rd in PISA. And so on, right? Top 15 in TIMSS. TIMSS is another test like PISA, which is done in classes 4 and 8. 95% of children in the country will have pre-primary education, and so on, right? Now, based on this, Dubai came up with a school inspection framework, which kind of defines, this is on the net, so anybody can see it. Yeah. Now, the process of school inspection is very interesting. So what Dubai has done is they have empaneled a number of external agencies. In fact, ASET, EI ASET is one of the, is a mandatory agency for the Indian schools. There are others for American schools and so on. So there are external agencies which are empaneled. The school does a self-evaluation, and they say this is our strengths, this is our weaknesses. So you have the external evaluation and the self-evaluation. Based on both these, a school inspection happens, and based on this, an overall performance evaluation is given. In fact, this sheet, this is actually from the UAE, where they actually show that for these schools, these are the tests that you can take, or this is the one that is compulsory. So schools have to take one of those tests, do them for a number of years. They can't just change every year, but they can change after 3 years or so. So this is kind of put out. Now this is, sorry. This is actual data that a school has prepared. So some of it, so you can actually see, it says here, this is a score from CAT4, which is a test. It's a score from ASET. It's strength and weaknesses from ASET. This is the self-evaluation. But what is shown on the top left is that for every class, they have calculated this is our score compared to international benchmarks, this is our score compared to the top 10 schools, and so on. So many of these come from the external assessment, but the school also works on that and uses this to make a plan. And based on all this, at least in Dubai, the school gets a rating which is publicly announced. So it's publicly known, and the school's rights to kind of add students and increase their fees depend on this. So somehow this is the system they have been doing from about 2013 or 14. And we've had these discussions with people saying, how does it work? Does it add pressure? What is the thing? And they say that overall this is good because it helps us focus. So every time a school has to make an improvement plan, saying this is what we are going to do to try and improve. So this is the kind of system in this. The good thing about it, they say, is that this is not based on someone's opinion, but it's based on the actual performance of the students. And we asked principals, so they said, I am able to now either guide my teachers or tell my teachers that, see, in maths in class 6, 7, 8, we have to do better. And because all of this data is being shown compared to a benchmark, compared to others. So they feel that this has kind of really taken us and is helping our school do better. Now, suppose we focus on what are the areas in which, if I look at the system, so by the way, we have been doing these assessments in the UAE is one of the countries, but we also do this in South Africa, we do it in India and a few other countries, but these 2 or 3 are the large ones. Now when we look at these assessments, what do we find are the 3-4 areas where the Indian system or the Indian students, what we are doing tends to be a little weaker. There are areas of strength also, which I am not focusing on, we can discuss it, but what are the areas of weakness or areas where we can improve? And we find 4 of them, right, and which is what is given here. The first is what we discussed, that children are used to answering questions which are very typical, which are very standard, which are very from the textbook type. And the way children look at a question is they say, okay, this is the question. I remember teacher had done this kind of question in class, or I remember this is like this other question that came in the textbook, and this was the method we used, this was the formula we used, I am going to write this. Or in history or something like that, I have learned, okay, these were the causes of World War II, I know this, I can write this. So we call that pattern recognition, which means I recall something, I match it with what I know, and the question I get is like that, and I'm able to answer it. Now, like we said, internationally exams are not, they have moved to what we call problem solving, where when you look at that thing, this is not like anything you have seen before. And you have to understand, make a guess, sometimes read information that is given there and answer based on that. So how do we move from this skill to this skill? So that is the first difference. A second difference is reading issues, right? Even in our good schools, right? Even in the, I'm not even talking about government schools and this thing where there are very severe reading issues. But even in our top schools, even in our system as a whole, the focus on reading is not so much. When our asset test is being taken and we ask students, what is your feedback? What would you like? They'll say, they tell us, we like the questions with cartoons and images and diagrams. We don't like the questions where we have to read. And already we are finding that even with asset, the amount of reading we have is less than what is there in the international papers. So one study we did was we compared the number of words in the PISA science test and the CBSE science test for class 10. And the PISA paper had 2.5 times the number of words for the same amount of time that is available for the children to take the test. So the reason they have this is that they expect you to read to figure out what is important and answer based on that. So reading is something that we find that, in general, I remember when we were in management school at IIM and all that, people would say, reading and quality of reading is the one factor that can generally improve your performance and success rate anywhere. So that's a second thing that we find even for schools. The CBSE, the discussions are happening, they are talking of stimulus-based, case-based questions and so on. But this is something that schools can also do, the focus on reading. The third thing that we are saying is neither teachers nor students are exposed to the kind of questions that are being asked these days, especially with more and more assessments going online. So if I have to do a paper assessment, my question can be of certain types. But if I am doing a computer-based assessment, my questions can be of different types. Now with SAFL, this will start changing because so initially SAFL questions are multiple choice. Okay, one very interesting about asset, right? Our asset test. In India, the asset test we do is only multiple choice. But in the Middle East, the same asset test is done in the Middle East. There we use non-multiple choice questions, and I'll show you some examples of that. Why? Because in the UAE, it's compulsory that everybody has to do the test on computer. So there we can say, look at this, click on this thing, put these things in the correct order, read this and highlight the words which kind of do this. We are not able to do it in India because almost 60% of students are doing it on paper, and we have to have comparability between the two. So, so the whole point on being exposed to new kinds of questions, is something which is needed. There are countries like Estonia, which they say are even more advanced in terms of using computers for assessments and ideas like that, and just types of questions. And we are not talking about, doing something fancy with computers. We are talking about pedagogically, educationally using this effectively to ask kind of questions where you get more information about how children are learning. So that is the third point. And the fourth point is, of course, conceptual learning, conceptual understanding. This is again what the NEP talks about, saying, rote learning and critical thinking skills. And for that, I have an example here. And this is an example in maths, but you can get similar examples in science or English and so on. Now the example is very simple. The question says that you have to arrange, there are 4 parcels and their weights in kilograms are known. And it says arrange them from the lightest to the heaviest. This is the question for class 6. Now what we are finding is that 36% are getting it correct. Only 36%. That means 63% are getting it wrong. But the real confusion is happening at this level between those two options, where a lot of children, 43% of children think that 2.5 is lighter, 2.5 is less than 2.15. And the same thing is actually shown in a graph here. What this graph shows, it may not be very clear for you, but what this graph shows is that the strongest children are fine, but if the entire class, all the other children except for the top 30% or so, all of them think that 2.5 is less than 2.15. Any thoughts? Why do children think that 2.5 will be? And you can try this in your class 6, 7 also. So any idea why they might be thinking that 2.5 and 15? Yes, they compare 5 and 15. Yes. They don't understand the decimal point. If you tell them for doing addition, put them in order, they'll do it. You say count the number of things and do this for multiplication, they do it. Mechanically they do it. But they don't understand what is 2.5 and 2.15. So they think 2.5 is either 5 and 15 they compare, or they compare 25 and 215. And they think this. But the surprising thing is, this is asset schools, that means top schools, not government schools. In government schools it's much worse. But so only 36%. Normally you go and ask your teacher, they will say this is a very simple question. You're just asking them to arrange decimals. They will get it. But only 36%. So this is what we mean by conceptual understanding. This is there in every subject, every topic of maths and every subject like science, social studies and so on. And in EI we have examples like literally you take any subject and our team will tell you, this is the misconception there, which most people will be surprised with. They will say that, the teacher will say, oh, I'm surprised my children could not do this, but it's like that. So that is, and that's because they are used to only, they are not used to this kind of a question. This question will not be there in the textbook, even though the teacher will say there's nothing wrong with this question, but it will not be there in the regular textbook or regular class. But if I start putting it, children will get it, and very quickly they will master it. There is no big problem. Now, so the CBSE has been talking about competency-based assessments. It's a term that has caused a lot of confusion, a lot of, what is competency-based assessments, how do you create competency-based questions, and so on. And so the way the CBSE explains it is they say that, we start with curriculum expectations and key concepts. We break it up into learning outcomes, break it up into contain and domain-specific learning outcomes, and finally into competencies. And they have also released many of these booklets. We have also helped make them because they asked us to do it. So you will find all the topics. So there's a concept in chemistry, basic concept in chemistry. It's broken up into key concepts. The NCERT book has learning outcomes in the beginning of the chapter. It's broken up into those. And finally, you have lots of competencies. The logic is that they must develop these competencies and not merely remember facts. However, the reality is a little more complicated than that, and that's what we say here, that simply by mapping questions to competencies, that does not necessarily create understanding. And what you really need, and that's what we've written here, both good and bad questions can be mapped to competencies. What you really need is a shift to good questions. Now, the CBSE is also doing many things on that, right? So even the latest thing in Baroda, the annual Sahodaya, the annual meet, they kind of released a number of these, what do we mean by good questions, sample of good questions, the new sample papers, there are attempts to make some of these changes. But the basic idea is to move towards questions which are testing for understanding and not merely testing for facts and recall. So that is the change that they are trying to do, and they are going to do, because there is a lot of understanding that if we don't do this, our children are not going to be competing. And I mean, they're also worried at one level that everyone is going for international board schools. But the real reason is this, and this is kind of understood even politically, that if the country has to succeed, the education has to shift. Every country, by the way, even if you look at China and all of them have made this change sometime in the last 30 years or so. In China, this change started happening in the early 2000s. So we are just a little late, but if you see everywhere, the system was like our system 50 years back. But in that period, everyone has made this change. Even someone like Singapore, everyone was like that, but they changed. We are probably one of the later countries that are doing it. But the change has to happen, right? The SAFL exam is actually many similar. Again, those of you who know ASSET, it's very similar to that in terms of having multiple choice questions. The goal of SAFL is not to give a grade or a rank, but to give feedback, to help the schools and the teachers understand where they are strong and weak. Our learning has been that all this depends on the quality of questions. So we are also training. So the SAFL questions are being made by a group of teachers, and even we have been involved in giving training to those teachers. And one pilot of SAFL has happened. The second pilot is currently happening. We don't know if it's going to be a very high quality test in the first round or the second round, but we think it's a step in the right direction. CBSE also says in addition to the test, we want to develop teacher skills. So the goal is both of them. So at least it's in the correct direction. Because of this, more computer-based testings will happen on computers, which is a good thing. All over the world that shift has already happened. So that's the positive of it. Like I said, it's very similar to what we do in ASSET, where you kind of get feedback and children come to know, and teachers also come to know where children have learned and not learned. Yeah. So again, I'm going to pause for a few minutes before I talk about our work on the board exam reform with CBSE, and just started with ICSE also. So yeah, it's becoming very one way. So any comments, questions, agree, disagree, it'd be great to hear from you. Yeah, just raise your hands. There's someone, yeah. And someone here?
Just now you were talking about mapping of questions.
You can use the mic, ma'am. Yeah.
So you mentioned about mapping of questions
Yes.
in order to attain good results in the assessments, right? So don't you think that curriculum mapping is required in order to map the questions? So mapping of curriculum if you adopt. So I think most of the schools are not doing it. So that is one of the best way to ensure that mapping of questions can lead to good results. Don't you think so?
So yes and no. So definitely, that's what we are saying here, and that's what the exercise is doing, where you have these competencies and then you map your questions to that, and it is good if done well. The only thing that we have to be careful is that suppose the questions are not good. Sometimes even a question which is not good can be mapped to a competency, and then you may not get the results. But if in case, so there are certain processes we talk about. One process we talk about is after the test is taken, look at the response on how the students have done. So then you realize, okay, this question has not worked the way that I wanted it to work.
I'm not talking about the outcome. I'm talking about the curriculum mapping first.
Right.
That can lead to mapping of questions.
Right. See, the only thing there that we say is that whatever you do in the curriculum and the class, the teacher is focused on exam mein kya aane wala hai. And it's not just in India, anywhere in the world, right? If you tell people my test is PISA, like I'm just telling you this. Suppose we tell our schools that your mark depends on creativity of your students to make something good. I'm telling you, initially there'll be a struggle, but everyone will then focus and we will have a very creative. It's just that what is it that is expected, and we all are, in India, we are very good at doing that. Now, because the exam has become the way it is today, people are focusing on that. In fact, when we do our thing and we go with our products, people say, "This is बहुत अच्छा है, लेकिन exam में वो आने वाला है, इसलिए हम वो करते हैं." Right? So, to that extent, we are saying that the curriculum, people say, right, assessments is the tail that wags the dog. So, we may say, okay, I want to change my curriculum, I want to change my method of teaching, but finally people are driven by what is it that came. But yes, I agree with you that if in case my assessments are done that way, and then I have to map what I'm doing with that curriculum, that is something that can make a real difference. Yeah,
I think when you mentioned that the old age tradition that we used to carry forward, we still are carrying forward. But what is my take on it is that students are pretty excited about can be really taken up well by them.
Yes. No, excellent point. It's a very good point. There are two things they say. One is they say our children, especially in the, if you leave out some of the top schools, our children cannot manage this. Now, our experience has been exactly the opposite. You know, we go to villages, we go to areas where children are like in really backward areas, and we give them a question from asset that people will consider is outside the textbook. So there is a puzzle, it will say, you know, these are these weights, now you have to calculate and tell what is there. And the children actually solve it, and they solve it correctly. Why? Because it's just fun and it's like logical for them. If you ask them to do something which is in the textbook, you ask them to divide 326 by 16, they are not able to do it because that procedure they not learned well. But here they had to think through, or they had to express themselves, and they are able to do it. So that's actually, you know, completely in line with, you know, exactly what you said, that the children find this as something which they are able to think. Maybe they see it as a game, they see it as fun, and they are able to do it. And the ability to do that is what we have to build on. So yes, I mean, even the CBSE has seen that, even with SAFL, even with, you know, the assessments that we have done with them, they say the feedback from the teachers and the children especially are very positive. It's not like they are not able to do it or something like that. So that is right. Yeah.
Superficial way of assessment. And so it's important to have quality teachers, and what Madam was talking about, the curriculum mapping. It's more important.
Yeah, see, this is a debate. A lot of people think this way and this way, and you know, we are one of those people who think, a lot of people think our way also, you know, which is the assessment leads to the other system changing. See, so you know, it's like, suppose I have, this is my teaching, let's talk about teachers and teacher quality and teaching method, right? This is my teaching method and this is my assessment. I want to improve. Should I change this first or this first? Right? Many people say you have to change the teaching first. We say you have to change the assessment first. Why? Because we have tried this. If you go to the teacher and say, Dekho, understanding by design, this is the correct method, this is this. They actually say, this is all very correct. I know it's correct. But the question is going to be like this, and I have to prepare them for this. And it is true. If you take our current board exam, I'm telling you, a child who thinks and understands is going to do more poorly than if you memorize all this. You know, we used to do a teacher training college in Ahmedabad, and in the question in the Gujarat, I mean, I'm sure this is true in every state. They asked, you know the minimum levels of learning, right? So they said, list out competency 8.2.4. So there is this long list of competencies, you know, literally hundreds of this thing, and the question was, list out this competency. So I don't know, is the teacher supposed to memorize all those things? So so the teacher says, if I have to do that, then I don't want to understand. Let me just focus on memorizing it. So that is the only thing. I think we complete, and that's what is happening now. We are saying that as we change the assessment, we'll also do training of teachers. But because we are changing the assessment and talking about it, now the teachers are also serious. They realize that, ye hone wala hai. Then, okay, all this teaching makes sense, this training makes sense. So
the assessment would change the pedagogy of the teaching.
Yes, exactly. That's what we are saying. No, we are completely, I think I have a slide at the end, completely correct that the teaching pedagogy, the teacher skills have to change. The only thing we say is that is not as difficult as it sounds. You know, we may think that nahi, hamare teachers nahi kar payenge, hamare bacche nahi kar payenge, but that is not true. See, bacche like 3 mahine mein seekh jate hain, teachers 1-2 saal mein seekh jayenge, and schools have tried this, but beyond a point, schools can't do it because they say hum ye karenge and system is still the same. What is the thing? You're right. You're right. 3 mahine, 1 saal or 2-3, and wo, you know, jinka board exam hone wala hai. That's a big discussion we are having both with the CBSE and internally, saying that, you know, we have to reach out to parents. We have to make videos for, like these kind of workshops we should do for parents. So one of the things we tell schools is that if you want us to do this workshop for parents, call us to your school, call the parents, and we'll do it, or we'll make a video of it. No? And we've heard parents say this, कि आपको जो करना है कीजिए, बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है, लेकिन marks कम नहीं होने चाहिए, which is not possible. because marks will go down because you will, if you change a system, there will always be that thing. So I agree with you that parents is a bigger hurdle, teachers is not so difficult, and children is very easy. But we have to make this change. And we tell the CBSE also that, you should be directly telling parents, you should be bringing out the parent videos. And and I think with the ICSE it will happen, they are more open to it. With the CBSE they are a little nervous because political and pushback and all that, but we think that will also happen. So you're right, explaining to parents. It's not that if you explain they don't understand. So that is the thing. But you're right, that is a big challenge. Okay, I'll move on. So I'll just quickly go through the work that we are doing with the CBSE. So a lot of our work, we are creating a lot of guidelines. When that term 1 paper happened, MCQ paper, and then the normal term 2 paper. So both, we've created a guideline document for how to create multiple choice questions. How many of you know about asset question a day, AQAD? I'm sure the older schools will know. On your phone or on a computer, if you type aqad.in, every day, so if it's Monday, it's a maths question, Tuesday is a science question, and for every class. So you can change to class 6 or class 7. It's completely free, open to anyone, and you can actually answer it, and the next day the child will get the answer. The child can type an explanation, and if your explanation is selected, the child's name will come the next day. Now this we have had for many years. Initially it was on paper and then email, and for many years we've had a website. Now this is available on the CBSE website also. So if you go to the CBSE website, you will see a question a day. It's also available in some states. So Gujarat, it's there in the student app in Gujarati. Nagaland, it's there in the thing. So that is the AQAD, which is available to, now the reason the CBSE did it is, they said how can we provide teachers and children access to questions like this, and right from class 3. So my goal is class 10, but from class 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, if I think, here is a question that is very different. So I can't see the question clearly, but there is some cartoon and it says, is this a tsunami or a cyclone? So it's just that the question is very different from what you are used to, but it is very much in your syllabus, your topic, and there's a new question every day. So this is something that, you can also use it or show it to the children. In some schools, they make the children choose the answer for a whole class, and they say, okay, how many chose A, B, C, D? Why did you choose C? Correct answer is A, but a lot of children are choosing C. So these discussions also are really good, and then children learn, I have to think, I have to read carefully, or they realize that it looks difficult, but actually it's not difficult when I try to do it. So that is something that we have given. 10,000 asset questions along with the data. This has been, is available now on Diksha portal. The idea that we say is if I am teaching class 6 and I can look at the questions of class 6 on asset and I know, children have difficulty with this topic, then even before I teach, I know that, okay, I can teach in this way. So that's one of the things that we are doing with CBSE. Are you aware of this document called the Essential Concepts document? This has been jointly released by CBSE and EI, and CBSE has brought out 1 or 2 circulars also on that. This was partly done at the time of COVID, to say if you are running out of time or the school time is less, then you don't have to do all the topics. These are the topics that are having high relevance to higher classes, and these topics have lower relevance, or it's going to come again and you can leave it for that class. Then we discussed, and CBSE also said that this is relevant even without COVID. So this is something that, and every class and every topic, not only is this essential concept explained, but there's an actual question example saying, how children understand it, how you can teach it in class, and so on. So this is something for every class and subject. Misconception posters are where you have an actual question. So if somebody really goes through, so this is very interesting, that a lot of learning gaps happen because children don't understand key ideas. And we saw, I think, a measurement example, we saw a decimals example, but it's there in all subjects. And if they don't understand this in class 3, their understanding of it in 4, 5, 6 is affected. Then by class 6, they understand the class 3 concept, but these things they haven't understood, and so on. So if teachers know that, okay, these are the trouble areas, call them misconceptions, common errors, hard spots, whatever, but it has to be based on data, not based on, I think this is a hard spot. Like this decimal example I told you, 25, 2.15, not many teachers know. And there are even more interesting examples like that. So these misconception posters were created, NCERT asked us to do it, and then it's there on the Diksha portal also. But it's there for all the classes, with a question example and an explanation on what can be done. We have created a bank of high quality competency based items. There are some examples here, but now, and so this is what we made, and the way it was released is that in November, so now, so we started working with them from April, and in November they released the first batch. So I don't know if any of you were there in the annual conference in Baroda, but so the competency, it's called competency focused practice questions, EI and CBSE. So for every class there's a whole booklet of questions, and it's available on the CBSE website. It's not under competency based education, which is where it should be, it's under manuals, but I think that's a mistake and it's going to come under, but you'll find it. If not, you can always write to us. So for every subject there are questions for class 10, and class 12 also is going to be released. Then sample questions, if you know, they normally release one. For the last 2 years they're releasing 2. So one of them we make, and we also comment on the one that they are making. And the sample papers have actually improved, and even the board papers have been improving. The level of improvement is different in different subjects. So some subjects we see a much more improvement than certain other subjects. So all this is, one thing it tells us is that they are serious, because it's going on the website, it's getting released publicly, and so on. And also when they talk about it, right, in front of 900 principals, they say that by 2027, our paper is going to be much more in line with the best boards internationally. So they've said this in a call of 900 principals. So they're quite serious about that. One of the other things we are doing is lots and lots of workshops. So the workshops are for teachers also. So on YouTube, when we have done, and all of this started during COVID, so a lot of it was done, which was good, because we all realized that we can do a lot of this online. But we're also doing physical workshops. We are doing workshops for actual board exam paper setters. We are doing workshops for the SAFL, question setters, the teachers who are setting up the SAFL papers. So all of this is happening. Many of this is available in the, on website. And the second thing is that the Sahodaya chapters of different cities are also now organizing these kind of workshops. So we have also gone for some, and we are also recommending, others are also getting in, good workshops related to this and doing it in these places. So, I'm sure that can be tried here in Indore also. So that's something that is a lot of the focus, because again, we all agree that, teacher capacity and building that skill is equally important. Another thing that we did for them is study the other board exams. So for example, we find that many of the board exams have 2 or 3 papers, so they will have paper 1, paper 2, not level 1, level 2, but like as a student, you have to do paper 1 and paper 2, with paper 1 having one kind of a thing, paper 2 having a different thing. Similarly, the point about levels of papers, or case based. So we told them that, look, in some of these papers, all the questions are case based. So that, they were studying that. So we are just looking at what others are doing. Are they both on the structure of the questions as well as the structure of the exam itself? Like what are the duration of the papers? What are the, like one thing we found is that the CBSE creates their papers in 3 months. All international boards use 12 months to make a paper, followed by a 6-month review. So it's an 18-month cycle. The CBSE has a 3 plus 1 month, 4-month cycle. So we are actually now telling them that, take that longer time, because it helps you to create a better paper. So those are some of the things that we are learning by studying boards internationally. Yeah. Creation of assessment frameworks, I talked about this, and I showed you that. So these are some of the things. We are doing more things. These are 4 or 5 things that we are doing with the CBSE. And finally, I have about 10 minutes more, so I'll just quickly run through ideas for schools, right? How schools can actually reform. So again, just what I said in the beginning, that a lot of the time what schools are doing is they are doing what the CBSE is asking for, or following what the CBSE is saying. But what we realize is that the CBSE is trying to get somewhere, and if a school realizes that and goes ahead of the CBSE also, it is actually good because your children are going to develop those skills. So, and the CBSE has kind of made the direction clear, but they are focusing on the large number of schools. So sometimes, and they themselves are kind of looking at the better schools and want to give those examples. So here are some suggestions for schools on this. So one of the things that, this is a way of putting that whole thing that we are saying, which is that if you look at, many of you may be aware of this model, it's called understanding by design. It basically says on any topic, there is a core idea. The core idea is the thing that you should never forget. I learn it in class 6, but I'm supposed to remember it all my life. It could be a simple thing like telling the time, or it could be this is the normal human body temperature, or this could be this is what force is, or this is what electricity is, and so on, right? And then there are certain things which are not so important. Yes, you need to know them. Maybe you will not remember it all your life, but you need to probably know it for a few years. And the third is, there is some information that you're taught. It's maybe just to help you understand the larger picture, or understand what happened. You don't have to remember it. Now, interestingly, this model is not what we think in India, right? So we would ask exam setters or teachers, "Is chapter mein kya important hai?" And you know what teachers always say? They say, "Sab kuch important hai. Kuch bhi page se kuch bhi aa sakta hai." It's a very standard thing. And when we told them this, they're actually surprised. I think when we saw it for the first time, maybe 10, 15 years ago, we were also surprised. But now we are so, like if you look at ASSET, all the questions will be from the core ideas. And this is what the NEP says, that questions should test core concepts. And what does that mean? So there's a question which says, what were the name of Mussolini's parents? This is an actual board exam question. Now, it's totally, it's like saying, what is the name of Narendra Modi's parents? Kya farak padta hai? And the story might say, Mr. Modi was born in this year, his father so-and-so was this, his mother was this, or something like that. But that does not mean you have to ask in the exam. And that's what actually happened because the textbook happened to have it. Whereas in modern papers, they do things like this, where they say that here are two passages, like today there's a Russia-Ukraine war, right? So here is a paragraph that came in a Russian newspaper, and here is a paragraph that came in a Ukraine newspaper. Read the paragraphs and tell what, etc., etc. So the students have to read both things. They also realize that, and then they realize that, okay, there is no one truth, but there are two perspectives, and this is what I learned when I study it. So we say that this, and it's not that the Russia-Ukraine war or this war is the important thing, but developing that skill is the big idea or the core idea. Whereas the names of Mussolini's parents is like, either in this circle or maybe even outside that circle. So you should not. So the whole principle is focus assessments on the core topics, concepts of the topic that is being taught. A second thing is, exposing children to something which is unfamiliar. Like I'll just show, I won't read the question, but I'll just very quickly explain. What this question says is that when you take a picture with a regular camera, it looks like this. But there are some things called infrared cameras. And when you take a picture with an infrared camera, it looks like this. And the different colors represent different temperatures. And this is very useful in many cases. And then it says, okay, here is a picture of a pencil taken with an infrared camera. And this is the legend. What do you think has just happened to the pencil? So, and the children are supposed to understand that, yeah, see, white means it's hot, the tip is hot. And one of the options also says the pencil has just been sharpened, and sharpening is friction, friction creates heat. So I've combined many different concepts. It's also interesting, right? I mean, the question also looks, and it's completely real life. This concept is actually used in forensics and many other kinds of things. But it is unfamiliar, right? If a child looks at it and says, "Aisa to textbook mein nahi aaya tha, I can't answer it." So that is the thing, you want to develop the skill. Sometimes we say that one of the goals of the education system is to build confidence in children that they can solve problems that they have never seen before. Which we have never said, or we don't have it in our thing. But if we want to build that thing, if you give them 5 or 10 such questions, they will start getting that confidence, because first one they'll give up. But the second one, when it is discussed, they'll realize, it's not so difficult. Or they'll say, oh, my friend is able to do it. And then gradually they start looking forward to it. and they develop that skill. And of course, we have to keep, because if I keep asking every question like this, then they know that it's no longer a thing. So that is the thing we say unfamiliar context. If you look at the board exam, and the good thing again, if you look at some papers, we are seeing the changes happening. But if you look at where it is not happening, you will find zero unfamiliar questions. That means everything is very typical. Children also get bored. The coaching classes are very happy because it's very easy for them, right? They can just take the same kind of question, and people pay a lot of money for this. I've seen this happening. So that's the point of unfamiliar questions. And there's another example of this, even in a simple question like this, right? This is the familiar format. What is the perimeter of this rectangle? 78% of children answer this correctly. I think this is class 5. Now, the same question is asked, here are 3 shapes. Which of them has a perimeter? Only 19% answered it correctly. So the interesting thing about 19 is if they guess, more children will answer it correctly. And people say children guess in multiple choice questions. We say children don't guess. If they guessed, about 27% will get it right. But they try to answer, they think they know the answer, and only 19% have answered correctly. 51% say only these 2 shapes have perimeter because iska koi formula nahi sikha hai, ya, it's not got straight lines. So unfamiliar questions force learning, and it sounds difficult in the beginning, but as you start doing it, you will get a bank of questions, and teachers also will be creating questions like this. Yeah. Gradually introduce 21st century skills and the thing, both developing the skills and testing the skills. And I just wanted to give 1 or 2 examples from our side. So some of you take ASSET, you know about the ASSET test. So ASSET has recently added 2 skills, 2 subjects. One is computational thinking. So computational thinking is not computer science, it's not coding. Now, that's what that graph shows. Computational thinking is about thinking logically and solving problems and having methods to solve, new or unknown or interesting problems. And programming is just one small part out of it. Programming requires computational thinking, but they say that even a doctor and a lawyer and in all our roles, we need computational thinking. So, and it's about certain skills that you develop to develop this thing. There's a lot of science on this. You can read it on our website. But basically, this is an assessment for class 3 to 10. So when we did the pilot and all that, we found that actually computational thinking skills are not very strong in Indian schools because we are not doing it much. So this is something that you can try. Right now, it's a, because everybody is doing paper pencil, it's a paper pencil based test. But in 2 or 3 years, once this goes on the computer, it's going to be even more powerful. But even a paper pencil based MCQ, you can also do it on ASSET dynamic, but the computer based, the MCQ based test is a good way of knowing how children are developing this skill. The second new test that we've added is reading assessments. Partly like I told you, reading is so important that our children developing this skill. So ASSET already has English, Math, Science, Hindi and Social Studies. Now computational thinking and reading assessment have been added. Data analytics is going to be added either next year or a year after next. So the point is that whether you do it with EI or not, try to focus on children developing these 21st century skills. 21st century skills also include global thinking, collaborative learning. We are thinking of creating a collaborative problem solving test that may take us 2 years to figure it out. And schools are doing it. It's not that nobody is doing it, but it's so by the way, they find that very few countries are strong in collaborative problem solving. So, so that these are areas, these are all related to areas of 21st century skills. Using technology in a pedagogically rich way. So this is actually an example from MindSpark, where, people use technology. We know of Zoom, we know of video and so on. But here what is happening is I'm using it to actually teach algebra. This can be a test also, it can be a learning also. So, the child has to simplify that expression. So when they open the bracket, depending on the mistake they make. So one common mistake children make is they multiply the 5 by the 5m, but not the second one, 3k. Very common mistake. So when the child does that, they get feedback immediately, which doesn't give the answer away, but helps them move towards the correct answer. If they make a different mistake, they will get a different comment. And the system knows that 70% of the time children make this mistake, 20% they make this mistake. So it is focused and therefore it is able to give this feedback. Yeah. This is a picture of people using these technologies, and this is what I was talking about, non-MCQ questions. So in this question you have to select options, but in this question you have to actually move the object, saying where will the image form. So they learn, we learn ray diagrams and all that, but you can actually manipulate it and learn it much better, but this is an assessment. And one or two more such examples. It actually says that what is it you are seeing in this video. So it's a time-lapse video. It says it's a time-lapse video. The plant is moving towards the light, and there is a question based on that. The question below is an example from English, where it says, highlight all the action words. So they have to click on the verbs in the passage. So things like this, or you can say select the phrase. You can say which line in the passage has this information. More such examples where they have to either select something, or this is a question in data analytics, like I said, planned for the future, but very, very important skill for children to actually develop. Anything which is new, looks difficult, but it is a skill that they learn. Another example, and this is an idea that we are telling the boards, but I would also tell schools, is the idea of, we talked about teaching versus assessment. So this is a teaching example where many international systems nowadays require children to do a project, typically in a grade 7, 8 kind of situation. That is fine, that is easy. The problem with the project is that bacha nahi karta hai, parents do it, they copy paste, they make a chart, they don't really do the thing. But there what we find is that people create rubrics. We create a method by which, and you explain to children that you have to do original work. So this is an example where, and sometimes again people say, the rich children in the cities can do it, the poor children cannot, and so on. So there are the project examples take situations in all situations, whether it's a rural area or a slum area, and show how the project can be done. So this, I'm just telling you in 2 minutes, but there's a whole lot of work on this saying, and we are trying to get boards to ask schools that in the 7th, 8th, children should do one project like this. So a lot of what we are talking about, thinking and teachers developing the skill happens through things like this. And again, both children and teachers are very excited about it because they are learning something which is like very relevant to their interest. They have to choose the project in a topic of their own interest and then work on it. Yeah. And one of the last points is, again, CBSE talks a lot about this, using a stimulus or a case-based method. That means there is something that you read and then answer questions based on that. So this one, it says that, below is a map of Antarctica. Estimate the area of Antarctica using the map scale. So there's a scale given. So it's a combination of geography and maths, but a very real life question. Today on Google Maps, if you have to estimate what is the distance, it's kind of based on a skill like that. This is a question from ASSET. It says simple thing. It says this is how a seismograph works. A seismograph is used to measure an earthquake. This is how a seismograph works. How long did the earthquake last? And like children think that, oh, I have not learned about seismograph, but that's fine. You don't have to learn. You learned about it by reading it. But the question you have to answer, you can just logically reason out and answer. So this is the idea of a stimulus. Yeah. So with that, I am going to close, and I think we'll take a break and my colleague Jayanti will take over. But in case there are any questions, we can spend 2 minutes and then we'll close this session and yeah. Kavish or
by the time we will keep the question paper on your table and the OMR sheet on the paper. It is the similar way how students take tests. We were discussing with some schools in the morning that we teachers also should be in shoes of students sometime and take a test and see how it looks. Yeah, it's a surprise test. We normally have it in schools. You can take a break, ma'am, if you want to just... we'll have... it's 6:04 now. We will... you can attempt the paper for 15 minutes. I believe there are 20 questions, so 15 minutes should be good. It's science paper, grade 6 science paper. You can take break, please.